That series of lectures about World War II in the Pacific was certainly interesting. I'm glad that we had the opportunity to attend.
Well, I have always been interested in all kinds of puzzles, so I was particularly attracted to the discussion of Taiwan's undetermined legal status.
The professor said that to understand Taiwan, there were 3 key items or 3 key concepts.
That is correct. She said that with those 3 items of knowledge, you can easily unlock the puzzle of Taiwan's legal status.
The first one was something about the end of the war.
We must recognize that there is a difference between the end of hostilities and the end of the war. The surrender ceremonies are simply the end of hostilities. The end of the war is when the formal peace settlement comes into effect.
So, for Taiwan, that would be the San Francisco Peace Treaty of 1952.
Exactly. Second, the surrender ceremonies only mark the beginning of the military occupation. This is the only possible interpretation that complies with the Hague Conventions and Geneva Conventions.
And I seem to recall that the other item involves the peace treaty.
The third item is that the specifications regarding any territorial cession are given in the peace treaty. Moreover, the territorial cession only becomes valid when the peace treaty comes into force. Before that time, the legal possession of the territory has not changed.
The professor said that from these simple facts, we can derive all relevant information about Taiwan's true legal situation. But I forget how it is done.
I took some notes. 1. For Taiwan, the surrender ceremonies of October 25, 1945 only mark the end of hostilities, not the end of the war. 2. The military occupation of Taiwan begins on this date. An important principle of international law says military occupation does not transfer sovereignty.
So, October 25th, 1945 was not Taiwan Retrocession Day. It was only the beginning of the military occupation.
3. When the Republic of China moved its central government to occupy Taiwan in December 1949, it was moving outside of China's national territory. At that point, it immediately became a government in exile.
In other words, the legal ownership of Taiwan territory stayed with Japan until the peace treaty came into force.
Additionally, the U.S. Supreme Court has said the conqueror acquires the rights to govern the conquered territory and may set up its own authority. So, in terms of conducting the military occupation, this clearly means that the conqueror is the legal occupier.
The professor also mentioned that her research had confirmed that 98% or more of military attacks against Taiwan in the World War II period were made by U.S. military forces.
So the United States of America is the conqueror and therefore the legal occupier. From this, we can immediately derive the position of the Republic of China officials in Taiwan. Beginning October 25, 1945, they are proxy occupying forces. Beginning December 10, 1949, they also gained the status of government in exile. There has been no change in these statuses up to the present day.
This means that at the most basic level, Taiwan today is still under a legal condition of military occupation by the USA.
Yes, the professor said that with no final disposition of Taiwan in the San Francisco Peace Treaty, the military occupation will continue indefinitely.
But some of my co-workers in Taiwan told me that some recent TV reports have advanced the theory that Taiwan belongs to the 48 signatories of the San Francisco Peace Treaty. She sent me a film clip. Here it is.
民国制宪的时候，台湾还是日本的领土，只是由中华民国占领，还没有正式成为中华民国的领土。而吊诡的就是，中华民国的宪法制定的时候，仍然没有取得台湾澎湖领土的地位。根据宪法第4条的规定，增加领土必须经过国民大会的决议。显然，行宪后国民大会从来没有做过这项决议，更增添了在宪法上面的台湾主权未定论的理论基础。那么，台湾的主权到底是归于谁呢？答案是由48个国家暂时共管。
That analysis is totally incorrect. With the coming into force of the San Francisco Peace Treaty in late April 1952, the Allies have disbanded. They are not exercising any authority over Taiwan territory.
I hate it when these TV announcers report on historical issues from an incorrect perspective.
The question which has to be considered is, who is the legal occupier? The legal occupier is not the 48 signatories of the San Francisco Peace Treaty. To understand this point, we need to reference the customary laws of warfare. These customary laws are very clear on the point that it is the conqueror who acquires the rights to govern the conquered territory. Beginning in the mid-1800s, more and more of those customary laws have been codified into the Hague and Geneva Conventions.
How does all of this relate to the displacement analysis, which the professor introduced?
Yes, maybe we need to return to the fundamentals. The professor introduced something called a sovereignty displacement analysis.
Sovereignty. That is a topic that confuses many people.
Sovereignty contains two components. One is exercise of control over territory. The second is legal ownership of the territory. So any displacement of these will result in a displacement of sovereignty.
The professor explained this by showing the video, right?
I made a copy of her diagram. It shows the sovereignty displacement analysis for Taiwan from the 1890s to the present day. There are 4 instances. We can call them D1, D2, D3, and D4.
So, let's go back to the beginning. I remember that as a result of the First Sino-Japanese War, Taiwan was ceded to Japan in the mid-1890s.
That was in 1895. According to the terms of a peace treaty between the Qing dynasty and Japan, Taiwan was ceded to Japan and became part of Japan's national territory. Hence, we have both components of the sovereignty being displaced. Qing China has given up the exercise of control and the legal ownership.
Qing China has a sovereignty displacement out. Taiwan was ceded to Japan, so for Japan there is a sovereignty displacement in.
That is D1 and D2 on the chart. So after 1895, Japan exercises control over Taiwan, and Japan has a legal ownership.
The professor said that the United States confirmed the validity of the 1895 treaty in 1922.
Yes, the 1922 Washington Naval Treaty fully recognized Taiwan as an insular area of Japan.
The definition of insular is A, of or relating to an island or islands, B, dwelling or situated on an island.
That was a situation beginning in 1895. Then a lot of things happened here in the middle. But the next time we have any event which affects a displacement of sovereignty is as of October 25, 1945.
What is the interpretation of that?
On this day, the United States' conquest of Taiwan became a fact. That is the final result. So the United States now has the authority for exercising control over Taiwan.
Yes, I remember. The United States exercises such a control component as the legal occupier. The professor said that the sovereignty has been displaced because the original Japanese government of Taiwan is put in a position where it can no longer function.
Such a result is quite a normal situation in occupied territory as a result of war.
But unfortunately, most people don't see the United States exercising control over Taiwan. This is because the United States has delegated the military occupation of Taiwan to the Chinese nationalists under Chiang Kai-shek. The United States, as the legal occupier, has allowed the Chinese nationalists to continue exercising authority over Taiwan territory after the surrender ceremonies of October 25, 1945.
As I understand it, the surrender ceremonies in Taipei were held on behalf of the Allies.
However, the ensuing military occupation is conducted on behalf of the legal occupier, which is the USA.
Then on April 28, 1952, there has been a further displacement of sovereignty because the legal ownership has been renounced by Japan.
This is the 4th displacement of sovereignty. So, what are we left with?
We are left with the legal occupier exercising control over Taiwan territory. The legal occupier is the United States of America. However, the USA has, tacitly or expressly, delegated this control to the Republic of China. which by December 1949 had already downgraded itself to the status of a government in exile.
And I believe that delegation of authority to administer Taiwan territory was originally specified in General Order No. 1 of September 2, 1945.
General Order No. 1 was written in the Pentagon and later approved by President Truman, before being issued by General Douglas MacArthur. Additionally, we must remember that in October 1945, the Republic of China military personnel were transported to Taiwan on U.S. ships and aircraft.
So, this is the situation. For Taiwan, there have been 4 displacements of sovereignty from 1895 to the present. Let's show the video now.
Let's look at a sovereignty displacement analysis for Taiwan.
In 1895, Taiwan was ceded to Japan by Qing China. On October 25, 1945, the Japanese surrender ceremonies were held in Taipei. On April 28, 1952, the San Francisco Peace Treaty came into force.
Today, we need to understand what the current situation is. Historically speaking, from the mid-1890s to the present, a discussion of sovereignty over Taiwan territory must deal with Qing China, Japan, and the United States. Fundamentally speaking, these are 3 countries, and we will have a separate column to examine the situation for each one. In other words, we will have 3 columns in total.
Sovereignty over territory has 2 components. The first component is the exercise of control, which we will illustrate in the left part of each column. The second component is the legal ownership, which we will illustrate in the right part of each column.
Let's look at column 1. On May 8, 1895, the sovereignty of the Qing dynasty over Taiwan ends. So, in regard to both the exercise of control and the legal ownership, there is a sovereignty displacement out. This is labeled as D1. Let's look at column 2. On the same date, May 8, 1895, the sovereignty of Japan over Taiwan begins. So, in regard to both the exercise of control and the legal ownership, there is a sovereignty displacement in. This is labeled as D2. Furthermore, we should note that while Japan's exercise of control over Taiwan ends on October 25, 1945, its legal ownership has not changed on that date. This is an important fact that is completely misinterpreted by many researchers who deal with Taiwan.
In regard to the disposition of territory, it is important to note that treaty specifications can cause a displacement of both the exercise of control and the legal ownership components of sovereignty. For Taiwan, both components of sovereignty have been displaced as a result of the specifications of their 1895 treaty. Next, we must consider the effect of military conquest on sovereignty. Military conquest is followed by military occupation. A firm rule of international law says that military occupation does not transfer sovereignty. However, military conquest and its ensuing military occupation do affect a displacement of the exercise of control component of sovereignty.
Let's look at column 3. With the Japanese surrender ceremonies on October 25, 1945, the United States conquest of Taiwan has become a fact. The conqueror is the principal occupying power, so the exercise of control by the United States military government over Taiwan begins. So for the United States, this is a sovereignty displacement in. This is labeled as D3. Now let's look back at column 2. With the coming into force of the San Francisco Peace Treaty on April 28, 1952, the legal ownership by Japan over Taiwan has ended. So for Japan, this is a sovereignty displacement out. This is labeled as D4.
So after overviewing these 4 displacements of sovereignty over Taiwan territory during the last 125 years, what is our conclusion?
Our conclusion must be that, legally speaking, the exercise of control by the United States military authorities has continued up to the present day. Of course, as we should realize, the United States military government has delegated this exercise of control to the Chinese nationalists who call themselves the Republic of China. Nevertheless, in the current era, the legal ownership component of sovereignty over Taiwan is still undetermined.
The professor said that this analysis corresponds exactly with all current U.S. government pronouncements on Taiwan.
Those pronouncements include: Taiwan is not independent. The Republic of China is not a state in the international community. We do not support Taiwan's membership in any organization for which statehood is a requirement. We do not support the two-state formulation of one Taiwan and one China. The Republic of China is an issue undecided. We have a one China policy.
With all this information analysis, it should mean that Taiwan's legal status is now already fully determined.
Actually, no. Taiwan's legal status is still undetermined. This is because for occupied territory, there are only two possible final outcomes. The first is that the territory itself becomes an independent nation. The second is that the territory becomes part of another independent nation.
Oh, right. That is the conclusion we reached by examining other situations of territorial cessions over the last 200 years.
So for Taiwan, its legal status remains as undetermined. This means that it has not yet reached a final political status.
In other words, Taiwan remains under a legal condition of military occupation. According to the customary laws of warfare, the United States of America is the legal occupier. A close reading of the San Francisco Peace Treaty also confirms this.
Our conclusion must be that it is the United States that bears final responsibility for the protection of both Taiwan territory and the human rights of the Taiwan people.
The professor also stressed another point. She said that after examination of the Taiwan Relations Act, 3 joint PRC-USA communiques, the One China Policy, U.S. Executive Orders on Taiwan, the San Francisco Peace Treaty, the International Declaration of Human Rights, and the rules codifications promulgated by the International Standards Organization, it can be confirmed that none of these legal sources contain any clauses or content which can be interpreted to provide a legal basis for the establishment of a Republic of China government structure on Taiwanese soil or the issuance of Republic of China passports to the inhabitants of Taiwan.
I want to tell all my friends to send letters to the U.S. Secretary of State and the chairman of the American Institute in Taiwan. According to everything I've heard and read, they certainly seem to be extremely uninformed of the truth of Taiwan's historical and legal situation.
Clearly, the post-World War II arrangements have left Taiwan under the jurisdiction of the United States Military Government, USMG, which means that Taiwan is, and continues to be, occupied territory of the United States.
The so-called Republic of China government in Taiwan is merely serving as a proxy occupying force for the ongoing military occupation, while at the same time fulfilling the role of a government in exile.